Alex didn't trust anyone. The luxury of his mansion, built with years of effort and fortune, did little to calm the unsettling feeling that had been haunting him for weeks. Something was wrong. He could sense it in the atmosphere, in the small details that seemed out of place, in the subtle changes around him, barely noticeable but impossible to ignore. Throughout his life, his survival instincts had been his greatest weapon, and now those same instincts warned him of something dark, something close. It started with the small things. A door he was sure he'd closed appearing open without explanation. Objects out of place, as if someone had deliberately moved them. Alex had an extraordinary memory for details, a skill he had honed over his career as a businessman. He had made a fortune by being meticulous, analyzing every situation with surgical precision. And now, that same precision was driving him mad. Everything pointed to her, Sophia. The young cleaner he had hired only 6 months ago. There was something about her, something that at first had seemed almost pleasant, her silence. Sophia did her job with the utmost discretion. She didn't ask questions, spoke only when necessary, and always stayed on the sidelines. But now, that same silence that once felt professional had become unsettling. The feeling that she knew more than she let on was growing inside him. In recent weeks, he had started watching her more closely. Not obviously, of course. He had never confronted her directly or asked her if she knew anything about the moved objects or open doors. But in his solitary hours, when the echo of the empty house resonated in his mind, Alex became convinced that Sophia was not as innocent as she appeared. He had no proof, yet. But the time to find it had come. That afternoon, as the last rays of the sun bathed the living room in a warm glow, Alex made a decision he had been mulling over for days. He was going to check Sophia's backpack. Every morning, she left her backpack in the same spot, next to the service door, a routine gesture, almost automatic. And every afternoon, before leaving, she would pick it up without Alex paying much attention. Until today. Alex waited for Sophia to head to the kitchen, as she always did at that hour, to finish cleaning the last corners of the house. He knew he had time. His breathing became slower, more controlled, as he moved toward the entrance where the backpack rested on a chair. He wasn't a man who made rash decisions, but at that moment, everything inside him pushed him to act. Standing before the backpack, he took a moment to consider what he was about to do. He knew that crossing this line, invading someone else's privacy, was an act of desperation. But he justified it in his mind. He had to know the truth. If Sophia was stealing from him, if she was hiding something, he would find out right now. He unzipped it slowly, the sound of the metal sliding open seemed amplified in the silence of the mansion. Inside, the first things he saw were the ordinary belongings of a young woman who worked for him, a water bottle, cleaning gloves, and a small notebook with slightly worn covers. For a moment, he thought maybe it had all been a mistake. But then, digging a little deeper among her things, he felt something rigid, something different. He pulled it out with trembling hands. A photograph. The air seemed to still around him. Alex held the picture up to his eyes, but his mind took a moment to process what he was seeing. It was as if time had slowed down. Emily. The face in the photo was Emily's, the woman he had loved deeply and who had vanished from his life over 21 years ago. It was unmistakable. The photograph was slightly faded, its edges worn from time, but Emily's smile, the way her hair fell over her shoulders, the details of her face, everything was there, intact in Alex's memory. For a moment, he couldn't move. How was this possible? His mind struggled to find an explanation, but everything eluded him. There was no way this photo, this image, could be in Sophia's backpack. It was as if a part of the past he had tried to forget suddenly returned, violently, without warning. Emily had meant everything to Alex. He had met her when they were both young and full of dreams. In those days, money didn't hold the same importance in his life. What drove him was passion, love for Emily, the desire to build a life together. He remembered every moment they had shared, the endless nights talking about the future, the promises they made to each other. And, above all, he remembered how it had all disappeared overnight. One day, Emily was gone. Without warning, without a trace. She simply left. Alex had moved heaven and earth to find her. He hired the best investigators, used every resource at his disposal to trace any lead to her whereabouts, but there were no answers. Emily had vanished as if she had never existed. The pain of that loss had broken him. The first few months were the hardest, a spiral of desperation and unanswered questions. But over time, Alex had learned to live with the absence. Or so he thought. But now, seeing that photograph, the past opened up before him once again. All the emotions he had buried over the years came rushing back with force. The pain, the confusion, the unrequited love, the anger. Emily. Her name echoed in his mind as he held the photo with trembling hands. And then there was Sophia. What did Sophia have to do with all this? A subtle sound broke Alex's trance. The kitchen door opened softly, and when he looked up, he saw Sophia standing in the doorway, watching him with a mixture of surprise and confusion. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither of them said a word. But then, Sophia's gaze dropped to the photograph Alex held in his hands. Sophia's expression changed. Her eyes widened, and her face paled slightly. She knew what Alex had found. She knew it from the moment their eyes met. Alex, for his part, felt the fury rising inside him, mixed with confusion and pain. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice tense with emotion. It wasn't a gentle question. The photo of Emily trembled in his hand, as if it refused to stay still amid the storm of feelings. Sophia took a step back, visibly nervous, but she didn't look away. She tried to regain her composure before answering. That's my mother." The words fell like a bomb. Her mother? Alex felt the ground beneath his feet crumble. Emily was Sophia's mother. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the distant sound of the wind outside the mansion seemed to remind Alex that he was still in the present. "What are you saying?" he murmured, barely able to comprehend what he had just heard. Sophia kept her gaze on him, though her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "My mother disappeared when I was very young. This is the only photo I have of her." Alex could barely process what was happening. Emily had had a daughter. And that daughter, Sophia, had been working in his house all this time without him knowing. The pain, confusion, and a glimmer of hope all intertwined in his chest, almost too much to bear. Suddenly, memories flooded back. Emily and he had talked about having children, about starting a family. But that possibility had vanished with her. How could she have had a daughter and he not have known? What else had been kept from him? The air in the room became thick, almost suffocating. Alex felt the weight of the world crash down on his shoulders, unable to process the revelation that had just escaped Sophia's lips. Emily. The woman he had loved, the one who had vanished from his life without a trace, was the mother of the young woman standing in front of him. And now, all signs pointed to the fact that Sophia might be his daughter. For a few seconds, the room fell into an overwhelming silence. Alex could hear his heart pounding in his ears, his thoughts swirling in an uncontrollable storm. He knew he had to say something, but the words eluded him, as if his tongue was tied in an invisible knot. "I might be your father." The words stumbled out of his mouth with difficulty, heavy, laden with a truth he wasn't even prepared to confront. Sophia looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and shock. Her large, wide eyes studied him as if trying to comprehend a truth she had never imagined. It was as if both of them were trapped in a bubble of incredulity, floating somewhere between reality and the possibility that this was all some cruel coincidence. "My father?" Sophia whispered, her voice breaking. The impact of the words hadn't fully settled. Alex noticed the slight trembling of the young woman, her nervous hands fiddling with the edge of her apron, as if she needed something to do to deal with the confusion she was feeling. "I don't know for sure." Alex finally found his voice, though it was more of a murmur than a confident statement. "But I was with your mother, a long time ago. Emily and we had a relationship. She disappeared, and I never heard from her again. If this is the same Emily in the photo, if this is your mother, then there's a chance." Sophia brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears. It was too much to take in all at once. Until that moment, Sophia had lived believing that her father was someone absent, an unknown figure she had never heard anything about. And now, the possibility that her boss, Alex, could be that man, it was overwhelming. "But my mother never spoke of you," Sophia stammered, as if trying to find some sense in the chaos. "She never mentioned your name. All she ever told me was that my father, well, that he wasn't with us. I never knew anything more." Alex felt a sharp pain in his chest. The idea that Emily had disappeared without telling him she was expecting a child felt agonizing, almost unbearable. He hadn't just lost the woman he loved, he may have lost the chance to know his daughter. His own daughter. "Sophia," he said, taking a deep breath, "I never knew Emily was pregnant. If I had known, I would have done everything in my power to find her. I don't know why she didn't tell me, why I never knew. But now, I think we have to find out." The words hung in the air, and Sophia nodded slowly, though she still seemed unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. It was all too much, too fast. The possibility that Alex could be her father had appeared like an unexpected thunderclap, and with it, all the questions that had lingered in her mind about her mother and her past now demanded answers. "What do we do?" Sophia finally asked, her voice trembling as her fingers toyed with the edge of her shirt. How can we know for sure?" Alex thought for a moment, though deep down, he already knew the answer. "A DNA test," he replied, this time with more firmness. "It's the only way to be sure. If the results confirm what we suspect, then we'll know. We'll know the truth." The word truth hung in the room, weighted with meaning. For Alex, that truth might represent a chance to make up for 21 years of absence. For Sophia, the truth was even more unsettling. If Alex was her father, her life would change entirely. Everything she had believed about her origins, about who she was, would crumble to make way for a new reality. And the fear of the unknown showed on her face. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Sophia admitted, tears filling her eyes. It's too much. I don't know what to do. I've always wanted to know who my father was, I've always wanted answers, but now that I'm here, now that he's right in front of me, I don't know if I can handle it." Alex felt a deep empathy for her. Despite how disoriented he was, he could imagine what Sophia must be feeling. He, too, was overwhelmed with emotions, but somehow, he felt like he needed to be strong for both of them. If Sophia really was his daughter, he had to be the pillar she needed right now. "I know," he said softly. "I know this is overwhelming. It is for me too. I don't know how we ended up here, or why things happened the way they did, but if there's one thing I can promise you, it's that you're not alone in this. You don't have to face this alone." Sophia looked into his eyes, seeking a comfort she didn't even know she needed. For years, she had carried the burden of not knowing. Not knowing what had happened to her mother, not knowing who her father was. It had always been a shadow in her life, an emptiness she had never been able to fill. And now, the man who might hold the key to all those answers stood in front of her, willing to help. "What if you're not my father?" she asked suddenly, as if that possibility scared her just as much as the other. "What if this is all a mistake?" Alex found that question harder to answer than it seemed. Because, deep down, a part of him hoped it wasn't. A part of him wanted Sophia to be his daughter, wanted the connection he had always longed for with Emily to not be completely severed. But he knew he couldn't let himself be swayed by wishes or assumptions. "Then we'll know," he replied calmly. "If the test results show I'm not, it won't change the fact that we both want answers. Knowing what happened to your mother is still important for both of us." Sophia nodded slowly, as if trying to convince herself that it was okay to proceed with that uncertainty. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's do it." The DNA test was arranged quickly. Alex made sure to contact one of the most prestigious and reliable labs, and within days, both had provided their samples for analysis. But those days of waiting were an emotional trial for both of them. Each faced the process in their own way. Alex, for his part, tried to stay calm, but memories of Emily kept haunting him. In his mind, every conversation with her, every detail of their relationship took on a new meaning. How could it be possible that Emily had disappeared without telling him she was pregnant? Why hadn't she sought him out? Had she wanted to protect Sophia from something, or was there a darker reason? Each of those questions tormented him day and night. Sophia, on the other hand, dealt with the weight with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She had never known her father and had spent her entire life resigned to that absence. But now, the idea that this void could be filled was as terrifying as it was exciting. Every time she thought about the possibility that Alex could be her father, she felt a current of conflicting emotions. On one hand, the desire to have a father figure in her life. On the other, the fear of what that would mean, the fear that everything she had built around her identity would crumble. Every conversation between them during those days was a mix of awkwardness and hope. They tried to maintain a tone of normalcy, but the subject both wanted to address hung over their heads like a dark cloud. Despite the tension, there were moments when Sophia found herself looking at Alex with more curiosity, trying to identify gestures or features that might resemble her own. Likewise, Alex watched her, searching her face for signs, something that might confirm what his heart was beginning to accept. Finally, the day of the results arrived. The anxiety they had both tried to keep at bay over the past few days reached its peak. Alex held the envelope in his hands, with Sophia sitting in front of him. Neither of them spoke, the silence was so tense it felt like it could be cut with a knife. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, unsure if he himself was prepared for what was coming. Sophia nodded silently, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Alex took a deep breath and opened the envelope. He read the words softly, first to himself, as he tried to process what the document said. Then, with a voice steadier than he felt inside, he said, "Sophia, the results confirm that I am your father." Sophia's world seemed to freeze for a moment. Her hands trembled slightly, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. There were no shouts, no exclamations, just a deep sigh that escaped her lips, as if she were finally able to release a burden she had carried her entire life. "You're my father," she whispered, more to herself than to him. And in that moment, although the silence remained heavy and the emotions still floated in the air, both knew that, despite the fear, something fundamental had changed between them. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of person is he?" she asked, nervous about what they might uncover. Alex leaned back in his chair, gazing up at the ceiling as if trying to arrange his thoughts. "James and I started as partners in several businesses. At the time, I thought he was a good guy, someone trustworthy. But as time went on, I realized he was involved in shady things. I didn't like the direction some of our ventures were taking, and when I tried to distance myself, things got tense between us." He paused, and Sophia could see the conflict in his eyes, the internal battle he was fighting. "I never liked the way he treated Emily," Alex continued. "He was too possessive, controlling. At first, I thought he was just being overprotective, but now I realize I should have suspected more. He couldn't stand the idea of her and me being together." Sophia swallowed hard. There was something in Alex's tone that made her heart beat faster, a growing sense of danger. Do you think he had something to do with her disappearance? I don't know, Alex admitted, his face darkening. But I'm not ruling anything out. We need to find out what happened in those final days before she disappeared. Something tells me James didn't tell us the whole truth. The next few days were filled with tense silences and furtive glances as Sophia and Alex began their investigation. Sophia, who had never met James before, threw herself into the search for information about him. She spent hours going through files, connecting dots, trying to piece together the puzzle. Alex, for his part, contacted old colleagues, those who might still know something about James and his past. A pattern began to emerge. James had been involved in suspicious financial activities, investments that seemed legitimate on the surface but, upon closer inspection, revealed ties to illegal businesses. He had stayed in the shadows for a long time, weaving a web of power and manipulation without leaving direct traces. Alex grew increasingly convinced that James had something to do with Emily's disappearance, but they needed proof. Speculation wasn't enough. There's more here, Sophia said one day, her voice sounding firmer than ever. She was sitting in Alex's office, papers scattered across the table. James owns a property outside the city. It's an isolated place, practically hidden. I found it in the property records I researched. Alex leaned forward, his eyes glowing with a mix of hope and caution. Do you think we might find something there? I don't know, Sophia replied, but there was a spark of determination in her gaze. But if someone wanted to disappear without a trace, that would be a good place to start. The decision was made quickly. The next day, Alex and Sophia drove to James's property, located on the outskirts of the city in a remote mountainous area. The journey was silent, both lost in their thoughts, anticipating what they might find. The fear of discovering something terrible loomed over them, but so did the need for answers, no matter the cost. James's property was imposing, but it also had an air of neglect, as if it had been abandoned for some time. The trees around the house were overgrown, and the driveway was littered with leaves and branches. There was something heavy in the air, as if the place harbored dark secrets. Alex and Sophia pulled up in front of the house. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught in the tension of the moment. Finally, it was Alex who broke the silence. Stay alert. We don't know what we might find here, he warned, his voice low but steady. Sophia nodded, though the nervousness was clear on her face. The front door was locked, but it didn't take much effort to force it open. Inside, the house was as disorderly as the outside. It was clear that no one had lived there for a long time. The furniture was covered in dust, and the faded curtains hung limply over the windows. There's nothing here, Sophia murmured after a few minutes of searching. This place is abandoned. But Alex wasn't so sure. There was something about the atmosphere that unsettled him, a persistent feeling that not everything was in plain sight. Let's keep looking, he said with determination. There has to be something. Then, after what felt like hours of fruitless searching, they found the first real clue. In the basement, hidden behind an old, decrepit bookshelf, was a concealed door. When Alex pushed it, the door creaked open, revealing a small hidden room. What they found inside made Sophia's stomach churn. There were photographs. Photos of Emily, some clearly taken in secret. In the images, Emily appeared walking down the street, sitting at a cafe, even standing in front of the house she and Alex had shared years ago. Alongside the photos were documents, financial records, money transfers that seemed to implicate Emily in something far larger than they had imagined. Alex stood frozen, staring at the photos, his heart pounding. James was watching her, he whispered. He was following her, even when we were together. Sophia trembled slightly as she sifted through the documents. This isn't just a kidnapping, she murmured. This is something much bigger. My mother was trapped in something we didn't even imagine. Suddenly, Sophia noticed something that made her blood run cold. Among the documents was a recent receipt. It was a bank transaction dated just a few days earlier. James was still active. And not only that, there was an address. "He's here," Sophia said, her eyes locked on the paper. "James is here, close to us. And he's moving money that could be tied to what happened to my mom." Alex clenched his fists, his mind racing. "We're going to confront him," he said with a firmness that surprised them both. They knew they were getting closer to the truth, and though the fear and suspense mounted with each step, both were determined to uncover what had really happened to Emily. There was a palpable tension in the air as Alex and Sophia drove to the address on the receipt. Both knew they were about to discover the truth about what had happened to Emily, but they also knew that truth could be devastating. James was no longer just an old business partner of Alex's, it was clear now that he was the architect of everything that had happened. In his mind, Alex kept repeating the same questions: why? Why would someone he once considered close do something like this? What was behind all of it? They drove in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking the quiet. Sophia kept her eyes on the passing landscape, her chest tight with fear about what they were going to find, fear that it was too late. But at the same time, that fear was mixed with a fierce determination. It was time to bring justice for her mother, no matter what it meant. "Are you ready?" Alex asked as he parked the car on a deserted street in front of an old, run-down house. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was heavy with restrained emotion. Both knew that once they stepped through that door, there would be no turning back. Sophia nodded, swallowing hard before she spoke. "We have to be," she said with determination. She had spent her whole life waiting for this moment, searching for answers that now seemed within reach. The house before them was small, but there was something sinister about its dilapidated facade. The windows were covered with thick curtains, and the front door looked as worn by time as the walls around it. Alex and Sophia exchanged one last glance before moving forward. They knew James was inside. There was no escape now, not for him. Alex, taking the lead, approached the door and knocked with his knuckles. The sound echoed dully in the quiet afternoon, like a warning of what was to come. There was a long silence, so long that Sophia began to doubt if anyone was really there. But then, footsteps could be heard on the other side of the door. The door opened slowly, revealing the face Alex hadn't seen in over 2 decades. James. The man who had once been his partner now looked like a shadow of his former self. His hair, once neatly groomed, was now a disheveled mess of grays, and his eyes, once full of ambition, now gleamed with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "Alex," James said, his voice rough, as though it pained him to recognize his old friend. "What are you doing here?" Alex didn't respond immediately. His emotions were swirling inside, a conflict between the years of accumulated anger and the need to stay calm to get the answers they both deserved. Sophia stood behind him, her lips pressed tightly together. Seeing James in front of her after all the days spent uncovering his role in her mother's disappearance made everything feel more real, more terrifying. Finally, Alex spoke, his tone cold and controlled, but with a force that left no room for doubt. "We know what you did, James." James raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play games with me," Alex shot back, stepping forward, his voice now brimming with anger. "We know you were involved in Emily's disappearance. We know you've been moving money. There's no point in denying it anymore." The mention of Emily's name caused a visible reaction in James. His hardened expression cracked for a brief moment, but then his lips tightened into a thin line. "Emily," he murmured, his voice trembling slightly. "You have no idea what really happened. Neither of you knows the truth." Sophia, who had remained silent until now, took a step forward. "Then tell us," she demanded, her voice trembling with pent-up emotion. "Tell us what you did to my mother." "Your mother?" James let out a heavy sigh, leaning against the doorframe. It was all much more complicated than you think. I didn't make her disappear, not like you believe. It wasn't a decision I made out of pleasure. Alex felt a knot forming in his stomach. Then why? James remained silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke, but his tone had shifted. It was no longer defensive, but filled with bitterness and weariness. Emily and I. He began, we knew each other long before you came along, Alex. In fact, it was because of me that you met her. James let out a bitter laugh. But of course, once you entered her life, everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't important anymore. Sophia glanced at Alex, surprised, but he didn't take his eyes off James. He knew this moment would reveal far more than he had ever imagined. I didn't want things to go this way, James continued. But Emily had secrets. Secrets even you didn't know, Alex. What secrets? Alex's heart began to pound faster. The fear of uncovering a truth he wasn't ready to face was beginning to take hold of him. James sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Emily was in trouble. Serious trouble. She had taken money, a lot of money, from people who don't forgive. Dangerous people. And when they started looking for her, she had no choice but to disappear. Sophia felt her stomach turn. My mother. What are you talking about? James looked at her, and for a moment, his face showed something resembling empathy. Your mother wasn't who you thought she was. She had a life before you, before Alex. A life she tried to leave behind, but those things don't just go away. And when her past caught up with her, she knew she couldn't stay. She knew she was putting everyone she loved in danger. The air in the room grew even heavier. Alex was struggling to absorb the information. Emily ran because she was afraid for our lives, he asked, his voice breaking. That's right, James replied, his tone cold but laced with bitterness. She ran to protect you, Alex. And to protect Sophia, too. Sophia stepped back, feeling as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. To protect us. That's what she did. And what about you? What role did you play in all of this? She asked, the anger rising within her. James looked at her with a soft sigh. I tried to help her, Sophia. At one point, I believed I could protect her. But when I saw she was too deeply involved in that dark world, I knew there was no turning back. The revelation left Sophia and Alex stunned, but one question remained unanswered: where was Emily now? Alex, driven by fear and anger, stepped closer to James, this time letting his fury surface. Tell me where she is, Alex demanded, his eyes burning with a mix of pain and determination. If you were really trying to protect her, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let all these years go by without giving us answers? James averted his gaze for a moment before muttering, I couldn't involve you any further. But... He paused, swallowing hard before continuing, Emily is alive. Both Sophia's and Alex's hearts skipped a beat. Sophia placed a trembling hand on her chest, unable to contain the shiver that ran through her body. What? She's alive, James repeated, but this time his voice was darker. But she's not the same person you knew, Alex. Time has changed her. It's better if you don't see her. Not now. Alex felt his heart race with fury. That's not your decision to make, he shouted, shoving James hard. If she's alive, we'll find her. Tell me where she is. You have no right to keep her from us any longer. Surprised by Alex's violent reaction, James raised his hands in surrender. All right. I'll tell you. But be careful what you wish for, Alex. Sometimes the truth is more painful than the lies. The world as Alex and Sophia knew it crumbled after James's confession. Emily was alive. It was a revelation they couldn't process immediately. Sophia, her hands trembling, felt hope rekindle within her, but at the same time, fear wrapped itself around her. If her mother was alive, how was it possible that she hadn't tried to contact them? Why had she remained silent for so long? And, above all, what condition was she in now? The drive to the place James had said Emily was hiding felt endless. As the car moved along desolate roads, Sophia and Alex remained silent, their minds trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. Memories swirled in Alex's mind, the last times he had seen Emily, her smile, her laughter, and then her disappearance without a word of farewell. Why had she run? Why hadn't she trusted him to face whatever was happening together? Sophia couldn't stop thinking about her mother. What would it be like to see her after all these years? How would she confront all she had lost, the questions she had carried inside her for so long? Emotions overwhelmed her, anger, love, confusion, fear. Everything mixed in her chest, making her feel fragile yet determined to understand why her mother had disappeared from her life. The car pulled up in front of a small cabin isolated in the woods, far from any trace of civilization. The air there felt heavy, as if the place itself held dark secrets. The cabin, though simple, was well maintained, indicating that it hadn't been abandoned, but rather that someone truly lived there. Alex turned off the engine, but neither he nor Sophia made a move to get out. The weight of what they were about to face felt almost unbearable. Sophia looked at her father with eyes full of doubt, but also a silent determination. Both knew they were about to face a truth that would change everything forever. "Do you think she's here?" Sophia murmured, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and hope. James had no reason to lie, Alex responded, though in his heart, he feared the worst. "But we'll only know if we go inside." The two got out of the car and walked toward the cabin door. Each step was slow, as if time itself had slowed down. Sophia could feel her heart pounding, each beat echoing in her ears. Her hands shook as she finally knocked on the door. The silence that followed the knock was so dense it seemed as if the world held its breath. Finally, slow footsteps could be heard from the other side of the door. Sophia held her breath. The door opened slowly, and there, standing before them, was Emily. Time stood still. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. Emily was not the woman Alex remembered. The years had left their mark on her face, lined with the signs of suffering and exhaustion. Her hair, once vibrant and full of life, was now a disheveled mane of gray. But still, she was Emily. Her eyes, though filled with deep sadness, were the same eyes Alex had once loved, the same eyes Sophia had longed for her entire life. For a few seconds that felt like an eternity, none of them moved. The weight of the reunion was too heavy for any of them to act. Emily's gaze swept across her daughter's face, almost in disbelief, as if she couldn't believe Sophia was standing there before her, not as a little girl, but as a grown woman. When her eyes finally met Alex's, something inside her broke. The emotion she had held in for 2 decades flooded her eyes, immediately filling them with tears. "Alex!" Emily murmured, her voice broken, barely a whisper. Sophia was the first to move. Without a word, she ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around her. All the pain she had bottled up over the years came pouring out in a torrent of tears as she held her mother tightly, afraid that if she let go, Emily might vanish again. "Mom! Mom!" she repeated between sobs, her voice thick with anguish and relief. Emily hugged her back, her eyes closing as tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," she whispered, her voice cracking with guilt. "I'm so sorry." Alex watched in silence, unable to move, his heart filled with a mix of emotions he couldn't untangle. The relief of knowing Emily was alive, the pain of everything they had lost, and the anger over the suffering both he and Sophia had endured. He took a step toward them but stopped, sensing this was not yet his moment. Emily slowly released Sophia, though she kept one hand on her arm, as if needing that physical connection to reassure herself that her daughter was really there. She stepped closer to Alex, and despite the years that had separated them, the shared pain began to pull them together again. "I never wanted to leave you," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper, laden with guilt. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I couldn't take the risk. I couldn't risk your lives." Alex frowned, his eyes full of questions. "Risk our lives? What are you talking about, Emily?" Emily glanced at Sophia for a moment before looking away, unable to bear the weight of what she was about to reveal. "I was in trouble, Alex. Serious trouble. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought I could leave everything behind, start a new life with you and our daughter. But there were people after me. Dangerous people." Sophia's stomach churned. "What kind of people, Mom?" Emily took a deep breath before continuing. "Before I met you, Alex, I wasn't the person you thought I was. I got involved in illegal business. At first, I didn't think it was a big deal, but when I tried to get out, it was impossible. I took money I shouldn't have, got mixed up with the wrong people, and when I realized I couldn't go back, I knew I had to disappear to protect you both." Alex felt the ground beneath his feet shift. "That's why you left? To protect us from them?" Emily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "James tried to help me. He knew what was happening, but even he couldn't get me out completely. When I disappeared, it was because I knew I couldn't stay close to you without putting you in danger. I thought that by leaving, at least you'd be safe." Sophia looked at her mother in disbelief. "But why didn't you ever tell us the truth?" I needed you. Dad needed you." "I know," Emily murmured, her voice thick with regret. "I know. Every day without you was torture. But every time I thought about coming back, fear consumed me. I thought you'd forgotten me, that you didn't need me dragging my dark past back into your lives." Alex felt his anger slowly dissolve, replaced by a deep sorrow and empathy. He had spent years hating her for what he thought she had done, but now he could see the truth. She had run to protect them, even though that decision had caused them unimaginable pain. He stepped closer to Emily and, without saying a word, hugged her. A hug he had waited 21 years to give. "Forgive me," Emily whispered, resting her head against Alex's chest as Sophia joined the embrace. "Forgive me for all the pain I caused you." Alex closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "No more apologies, Emily," he murmured. "We're here now. That's all that matters." Sophia, caught between them, also sobbed, finally feeling what it meant to be with both her mother and father at the same time. The emptiness in her heart that she had carried her entire life was slowly beginning to fill. The hours that followed passed in a blur of tears, hugs, and confessions. The weight of the years couldn't disappear instantly, but it was clear they had found their way back to each other. Sophia was overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions, relief, pain, happiness, and sadness, all at once. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that healing would take time, but at least now she had both her mother and father in her life. And that was enough. Alex, though still processing everything that had happened, felt relieved that, after all, he hadn't lost Emily forever. The love they had once shared was still there, buried beneath years of suffering but still intact. There was much to fight for, many conversations still to have, but at the end of the day, they were a family once more. And after so much pain, so much uncertainty, and so many lost years, love and forgiveness were the foundations upon which they would begin to build a new life together. Don't forget to subscribe. If you were captivated by this story full of surprises and emotions, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. New adventures every week that will leave you breathless. We want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Did you expect that ending? Leave us a comment and share your thoughts. Your opinion is very important to us, and we love reading your insights and theories. Don't leave yet. Now choose the next story that's appearing on your screen because we know you won't want to miss what's coming next. The suspense and excitement continue.